The First Minister of Scotland has apologised to thousands of alleged witches who were killed centuries ago. Politician Nicola Sturgeon said the women suffered injustice on a colossal scale. The decision, which was branded a stunt in some quarters, marked International Women's Day in early March and saw her seek to make amends for Scotland's witchcraft purge, which took place under the Scottish Witchcraft Act. An estimated 4,000 Scots were accused of being witches between 1563 and 1736. The First Minister said the injustice they suffered was driven by misogyny and needed to be recognised. The apology came after a petition looking to grant a pardon for the 4,000 people accused of witchcraft was introduced into the Scottish Parliament by campaigners from the organisation Witches of Scotland. Witchcraft laws passed by James VI of Scotland, who also became James I of England, led to a nationwide search for witches that became known as the Great Scottish Witch Hunt of 1597. It was the second of 5 national witch hunts in the country. Like others, it was conducted under the supervision of royal commissions, but it is one of the most poorly documented of the great Scottish witch hunts, as it was not documented centrally and lacked coherent control, leading to wild purges. Responsibility fell to local authorities, which were left to record the accusations and outcomes of trials. Around 200 witches were believed to have been killed in the 1597 hysteria. Other Scottish witch hunts took place in 1590 to 91, 1628 to 31, 1649 to 59, and 1661 to 62. Of the approximate 4,000 people accused, over half were executed, and more than 85% of those convicted were women or girls. A raft of trumped-up witchery-based charges were levelled at the unfortunate women. These range from causing hangovers and turning into an owl to meeting with the devil and conjuring up storms to sink the ships of James VI. Agnes Sampson, an elderly woman, was the first woman convicted of witchcraft in Scotland in 1591, and Janet Horne was the last in 1727. In one case, a woman called Lilia Sadie confessed under duress to the crimes of casting malicious spells and having sex with the devil. She died in 1704 after being sentenced to be burned to death, but she died imprisoned, possibly by suicide, with her body being buried under a large stone. Nicola Sturgeon said, "Those who met this fate were not witches, they were people, and overwhelmingly women. At a time when women were not even allowed to speak as witnesses in a courtroom, they were accused and killed because they were poor, different, vulnerable, or in many cases just because they were women. It was an injustice on a colossal scale, driven at least in part by misogyny in its most literal sense, hatred of women. The pardon the petition calls for would require this Parliament to legislate, and in future this Parliament may choose to do so. But in the meantime, the petition also calls for an apology. After all, these accusations and executions were instigated and perpetrated by the state. And so today, on International Women's Day, I am choosing to acknowledge that egregious historic injustice and extend a formal posthumous apology to all those accused, convicted, vilified or executed under the Witchcraft Act of 1563. The campaign group Witches of Scotland, which has called for all those put to death to be pardoned, welcomed the apology. The organisation said, "This is the first formal recognition of this terrible miscarriage of justice." Marking the occasion, the burning of Agnes Sampson was recreated on Calton Hill in Edinburgh. Before her death, she was subjected to sleep deprivation, a common interrogator's tool as it eventually produced hallucinations used as evidence. In 1563 in Scotland, the Witchcraft Act was brought into law and remained in law until 1736. During this time, witchcraft was punishable by death, with many being strangled and then burned at the stake. When accused of witchcraft, suspects were locked up awaiting trial and tortured to confess. Torture in Scotland was usually by way of sleep deprivation, but other cruel techniques included pricking. This was stabbing the skin with needles and bodkins to see how the person reacted to the drawing of blood and whether they bled at all, and the stripping and examination of the body to see if any witch's mark could be found on them. Often these methods were carried out in public. Torture by crushing and pulling out nails was also used. King James VI of Scotland, who reigned from 1566 to 1625, considered himself an expert in witchcraft and penned the book Demonology in 1597. The grim tome was about witchcraft and other occult matters, including evil creatures like incubi and succubi, effectively sexual vampires that exploited paralysed humans to create demonic entities. The book also touched on actual vampires and werewolves and is believed to have influenced the rituals and practices of the Weird Sisters in William Shakespeare's Macbeth. The king also attended the North Berwick witch trials, where one of the complaints was that witchcraft had been used to create storms to cause a bad crossing for James's ship across the ocean. James saw plots everywhere, both real and imagined, and his obsession fueled a satanic panic in Scotland. As King of England, he also famously survived the gunpowder plot of Guy Fawkes in 1605, after he ruthlessly cracked down on Catholics. So what do you think about the apology? Is it too late, or is it simply a stunt? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and most importantly subscribe. Thank you for watching.